He left me alone, pregnant, and broken. I carried this pain for years, dreaming of his return, praying for a chance. And then the truth hit me in the face: my son was never his. The second I told Jason I was pregnant, he looked at me like I just confessed to a murder. My name's Emily. I'm 28 years old, and back then, I worked the front desk at a little local gym, the kind that smells like rubber mats and stale protein powder. Jason, 32, used to come in every morning, flashing me that lazy, perfect smile that made me feel like I mattered. I really believed we were building something real. That night, the night I told him, we were sitting in his car outside my tiny apartment, windows fogged up, radio humming low. I had my hand on my stomach like it could somehow protect what was growing inside. I thought he'd pull me into his arms. Instead, he jerked his hands off the steering wheel like it had burned him. Is this a joke? Jason's voice was sharp, almost cruel. You're trying to trap me, aren't you? I laughed at first, thinking he was scared, not serious. But then I saw it, that flicker of something in his eyes. Disgust. Suspicion. Fear. Like I was something he needed to get away from. And for the first time in my life, sitting there with my heart cracking open inside me, I realized the person I loved was about to become a stranger. I don't even remember getting out of the car. One second I was begging him, please Jason, listen, this is real, and the next I was standing on the curb in the freezing air, my breath coming out in ragged puffs, watching his taillights disappear into the dark like he couldn't leave fast enough. I stumbled up the stairs to my apartment, the thin carpeting soaking up my soaked sneakers. I slammed the door behind me and leaned against it, sliding down until I was just a shaking mess on the floor. The whole apartment smelled like burnt coffee and the cheap vanilla candle I'd left burning too long. I pressed my forehead against my knees and whispered, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. But the walls didn't believe me. Neither did I. The next day I thought maybe he'd calm down. Maybe he'd call. Apologize. Say he needed time but he wanted to be a father. Instead, my texts stayed on delivered, never read. My calls went straight to voicemail. And when I showed up at his place 2 days later, clutching the printed ultrasound and shaking hands, an older woman I'd never met told me through the screen door that Jason didn't live there anymore. No forwarding address. No note. Just gone. It was like he'd swallowed up all the air in my world and then vanished, leaving me to suffocate in the silence. I barely remembered the weeks that followed. I worked my shifts at the gym in a daze, forcing smiles for sweaty strangers, while inside I was hollowing out. At night, I'd curl up on the lumpy second-hand couch, one hand on my growing belly, and cry so hard I gave myself headaches. The walls around me felt like they were closing in, whispering all the things I didn't want to hear. You're alone. You're unwanted. He doesn't love you. No one will. I skipped my own baby shower. What was the point? Who was going to come? Jason's memory. My parents, who had disowned me years ago for throwing away my future when I dropped out of college. I told myself, lied to myself, that I didn't need anyone. That all my baby needed was me. But there were nights I'd lie awake, tracing the stretch marks spidering across my skin, feeling him kick inside me, strong, beautiful, real, and I'd wonder if I was already failing him. If maybe Jason had seen something in me I hadn't seen in myself yet. That I wasn't enough. The worst part wasn't the loneliness. It was the doubt, the ugly little voice inside me that hissed. Maybe he was right to leave. Maybe you don't deserve to be a mom. The night my water broke, I was sitting alone in that same crummy apartment, eating stale cereal straight from the box. I didn't even have a hospital bag packed. I wasn't ready. I was terrified. And there was no one to call. Not Jason. Not my parents. Not a single soul. Just me, and the tiny life inside me, counting on someone who barely knew how to save herself. The fluorescent lights in the hospital room buzzed like angry bees above me. I was lying there alone, legs numb, heart thudding, gripping the starched white sheets like they were the only thing keeping me tethered to this world. When they placed my son in my arms, he was so tiny, all soft cries and wrinkled fists, and for a second, everything else vanished. It was just him and me. And for the first time in months I felt something almost like peace. A bubble of it. So fragile I was afraid to breathe. He blinked up at me with dark blue eyes, as that would later turn Jason's shade of brown. And when his mouth curled into the ghost of a crooked smile, I felt my chest cave in. Jason. Jason had left us. Jason had chosen not to be here. I pressed my lips to my son's forehead, my tears soaking his soft cap, and I made him a silent promise. I will never leave you. I will never abandon you. I will be everything he wasn't. I named him Noah. It meant rest, comfort. God knew we both needed it. The first year blurred by in a storm of diapers, late-night feedings, and an ache so deep I thought it would split me in two. I worked doubles at the gym, sneaking Noah into the daycare whenever I could. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at the fathers who picked up their toddlers, the way their faces lit up, the way their kids squealed and ran into their arms, and I would feel something sour rise in my throat. Jealousy. Grief. Rage. I hated Jason for what he stole from us. I hated myself more for still wanting him to care. I tried to bury him. I told myself Noah didn't need a father. That love from one person, even if it was broken, even if it was messy, would be enough. But the truth clawed at me in the quiet hours when the world was asleep and it was just me, Noah's soft breathing, and the endless aching dark. He deserved to know where he came from. He deserved the truth. Even if that truth was ugly. It was around Noah's second birthday when I heard Jason's name again, the first time since he vanished. I was wiping frosting off Noah's cheeks at the tiny party I'd thrown in my apartment. Just me, two neighbors who barely knew me, and a smashed grocery store cake, when my old coworker Marissa texted. "Hey, weird question. Wasn't your ex Jason L*****? I heard he's sick. Like, really bad sick." My fingers froze on the screen. Sick? Jason? I called her immediately. Marissa answered breathless, gossip rushing out of her like steam from a kettle. "He's in the hospital. Liver failure or something. I guess he's been real bad off for months. His girlfriend, Michelle? She's been posting all these dramatic prayers online." My head spun. Jason. The man who had ghosted me. The man who had denied his own child. The man who had left me bleeding and scared on a cold apartment floor. Sick. Vulnerable. Mortal. And a voice deep inside me, one I didn't want to hear, whispered, "You need to find him. You need to tell him. Not for me. Not for revenge. But for Noah. Because no matter what Jason had done, he was still half of my son's story." The next few days I barely slept. I found myself scrolling through Michelle's public posts, feeling sick. Pictures of Jason in a hospital bed, looking thinner, frilier, a ghost of the man I remembered. Her captions were syrupy sweet, full of prayers and God's plan, and only real love can save him. And tucked between the lines, a thick tension. They didn't want old ghosts creeping out of closets. I reached out through a mutual friend. I kept it short. Just said, "I need to talk to Jason. It's important. It's about a child." The answer came back within hours. But it wasn't from Jason. It was from Michelle. And it hit me like a punch to the gut. "There's no child. Stop lying. You're just desperate for money. Jason wants nothing to do with you. Stay away, or we'll get a lawyer." I stared at the messages until the screen blurred. The baby monitor crackled softly beside me. Noah shifted in his sleep, his tiny body curled around a stuffed bear. My throat burned. I wanted to scream, to throw my phone against the wall, to tear the world apart with my bare hands. Instead, I typed 2 words. DNA test. And hit send. The truth wasn't going to hide forever. Not while I was still breathing. The hospital smelled like bleach and something heavier, sickness, maybe, or sadness. I stood in the sterile lobby, clutching a crumpled envelope containing the court paperwork I'd scraped together for a DNA test. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I hadn't wanted it to come to this. Dragging the past through fluorescent-lit halls, marching into a place where people were clinging to life, just to demand a scrap of dignity. But Michelle had left me no choice. Jason had left me no choice. I asked the front desk nurse if I could see him. She gave me a look, sympathy tangled with suspicion, and told me visitors had to be approved by family. Michelle had already left instructions. I wasn't allowed in. So I waited. I sat on a cracked vinyl bench for hours, the vending machine humming beside me, watching the elevator doors open and close like some cruel magic trick. Every time, hoping I'd see him. Every time, swallowing disappointment when I didn't. Finally, near midnight, I saw him. Jason. He was being wheeled out of a room, thin and pale and so heartbreakingly different I almost didn't recognize him. His eyes, once so full of cocky mischief, looked lost. The tattoos on his arms, once bold, now looked faded against his hollow skin. Michelle was beside him, her hand clamped possessively on his shoulder, her face hard as stone when she spotted me. She whispered something into Jason's ear. He turned his head. And for a second, just a second, our eyes met. I stood up, my legs trembling. "Jason," I said, voice cracking. "It's me. Emily." His brows furrowed like he was trying to place me. like I was some dream half-remembered. Michelle stepped in front of him, blocking my view. "You need to leave," she snapped. "Right now." "I just want a minute," I begged. "Please just listen. It's about. If you cared about him, you'd let him heal," she hissed. "You're just trying to scam him. You're disgusting." Her voice echoed down the hallway. A few nurses looked over. One of them whispered into a phone. I pulled the envelope from my purse, holding it out like a white flag. "I just want the DNA test. That's all. If he's not the father, I'll walk away forever. You'll never hear from me again." Michelle's laugh was sharp and cold. "Convenient how you show up now when he's weak. Pathetic." Jason didn't say a word. He just stared at me, blinking slowly like he was seeing me through a fog. Or like he wanted to speak, but the weight of everything, the sickness, the lies, the fear, was pinning him silent. I don't know what I expected. A miracle? An apology? Some dramatic moment where he remembered what we had, what he threw away. Instead, he turned his face away. Let Michelle will him past me. Without a word. The elevator doors slid shut behind them. And just like that, he was gone again. I stumbled back out into the parking lot, the icy air slapping me awake. I sat in my beat-up Corolla, the engine rattling, my breath frosting the inside of the windshield. And I cried. Not the quiet, dignified kind of crying they show in movies. The ugly heaving sobs that rip out of you in chunks. The kind of crying that makes you wonder if you'll ever breathe right again. Somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, "Give up. He's made his choice. Move on." But another voice, louder, angrier, spat back. "No. Not for you. For Noah. Noah deserved to know the truth. Even if Jason wanted to erase us. Even if Michelle painted me as a villain. Even if every door slammed in my face." I wiped my cheeks with my sleeve and opened my phone. I pulled up the legal aid website I'd bookmarked weeks ago but hadn't dared touch. I started filling out the paperwork to petition for a court-ordered DNA test. My hand shook so badly I could barely type. But I kept going. Because the truth wasn't negotiable. Not anymore. Just as I finished, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I stared at it, heart hammering, a sick feeling blooming in my gut. Was it Jason? Michelle? Another threat? I swiped to answer, my voice barely a whisper. "Hello." A man's voice crackled on the line. Familiar. Strange. "Emily? It's Brandon. I think I might be Noah's father too." The world tilted. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. What the hell was happening? For a long moment, I just sat there with Brandon's voice crackling through the phone, my mind spinning in 100 directions at once. The world outside my car was gray and cold, but inside it felt like I was drowning. I'm sorry," Brandon said, his voice awkward, heavy with guilt. "I know it's a lot. I should have said something sooner. I didn't know how. But if there's even a chance. I need to know. You deserve to know." I closed my eyes. Memories crashed over me, blurry, shameful nights from that lost, broken time after Jason and I first started falling apart. A stupid party. Too much to drink. An old friend offering comfort the only way he knew how. I had told myself it didn't mean anything. Had buried it so deep I almost believed it had never happened. And now it was clawing its way back up. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded far away. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay. We'll do a test too." After I hung up, I just sat there in the dark, the silence pressing down on me until I could hardly breathe. The parking lot was almost empty now, the streetlights buzzing like lonely sentries. My reflection stared back at me from the car window, pale, hollow-eyed, a stranger. It hit me then, sharp and brutal. I was alone. No family backing me up. No partner holding my hand. No one to say you're doing the right thing when every step felt like walking blindfolded through a minefield. Just me. Me and my doubts. Me and my baby boy, sleeping peacefully at home, trusting me to figure this mess out. The next few days blurred together into a fog of paperwork, phone calls, and a bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of coffee could touch. I booked 2 separate paternity tests. One for Jason. One for Brandon. I didn't tell Brandon about Jason's situation. It didn't feel right, like stirring up more chaos in a life already collapsing. And part of me, the small, selfish part, clung to the hope that maybe, if Jason wasn't the father, maybe I could forget him altogether. Maybe Noah could have a fresh start. Maybe I could. But every time I looked at my son, his messy dark hair, the way he crinkled his nose when he laughed, I saw Jason. And it hurt. It hurt so much I thought it might kill me. Michelle wasn't finished with me either. A few days after I filed for the court-ordered test, I came home to find a crumpled flyer stuffed into my mailbox. No return address. Just a cheap piece of printer paper with words scrawled across it in thick black marker. Stay away. He's dying. Let him die in peace. My hands trembled so hard I almost dropped it. Neighbors looked at me funny when I stumbled up the stairs, clutching Noah tighter against my chest. They didn't know the whole story. They just knew the whispers Michelle had spread. That I was a gold digger. A liar. A woman scorned trying to drag a dying man through the mud. I was the villain in a story I hadn't even gotten to tell. The isolation was the worst part. It didn't just creep into my days, it burrowed into my bones. I stopped talking to my coworkers. I stopped answering texts, stopped pretending everything was fine. I'd go through the motions, feed Noah, change him, rock him to sleep, but inside, I felt like I was unraveling one thread at a time. Some nights after Noah fell asleep, I'd sit at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, the cheap clock ticking too loud on the wall. I'd think about calling someone. Anyone. But then I'd remember. There was no one. I had burned too many bridges. Or maybe they had burned me. Either way, I was standing alone in the ashes now. One night, I found myself on the bathroom floor, back pressed against the cold tile, sobbing so hard I couldn't catch my breath. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, making everything feel too bright, too exposed. The walls closed in, the floor spun, and for a split second I thought, I can't do this. I'm not strong enough. I can't be everything he needs. I pressed my forehead to the ground. It felt like surrender. Maybe it was. But then Noah cried out from his crib, a soft, confused little sound, and something inside me snapped. I dragged myself up, wiped my face, staggered to him. When I picked him up, he nestled into my shoulder, trusting, warm, real. And somehow, through the numbness, I felt it. The faint, stubborn heartbeat of love, of hope, of fighting. This wasn't just about Jason, or Brandon, or Michelle. This was about Noah. And I would walk through fire for him, even if I had to do it alone. Something inside me changed after that night. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't poetic. It was rage. Cold, clean, cutting through the exhaustion like a blade. I wasn't going to cry in corners anymore. I wasn't going to let Michelle paint me into some desperate villain. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let Jason or Brandon or anyone erase my son's right to the truth. If the world wanted me to be the villain, fine. I'd be the villain they couldn't ignore. The next morning, I marched into the courthouse with Noah balanced on my hip and filed the final petition for the DNA tests. I paid the fees I couldn't afford. I signed my name in shaking, furious letters. When I walked back to my car, I caught my reflection in the window. The girl who had begged outside Jason's hospital room was gone. This woman, messy hair, dark circles, stubborn set to her jaw. She wasn't here to beg anymore. She was here to fight. Michelle must have gotten the court notice within a day because her next move came fast. She messaged me directly this time. A long, dripping text full of fake sweetness. Please think about what you're doing, it said. Jason is fragile. Stress could kill him. Do you want to be responsible for that? Do the right thing. Walk away. I stared at my screen, pulse pounding. The nerve. The manipulation. For a second, the guilt almost worked. Almost. But then I thought of Noah asleep in his room with his stuffed bear tucked under his arm. And my answer became crystal clear. I didn't even bother replying. I blocked her number. Blocked her burner accounts too when they started popping up, one after another like weeds. I wasn't here to play nice. I was here to protect my son. A week later, I got the call. Jason had been ordered by the court to submit to the DNA test. Brandon too. It was happening. I sat on the couch holding the official notice in my hands, the paper trembling like a living thing. Noah played on the carpet beside me, babbling to himself, stacking colorful blocks into messy towers and laughing when they fell. I watched him for a long time. Tried to memorize the exact sound of his laughter. The exact way the light caught in his messy hair. I didn't know what the tests would say. I didn't know what kind of chaos was coming next. But for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't scared anymore. Whatever the truth was, whatever it cost, I would stand and face it. The date was set. 2 weeks. 2 weeks until the results would either shatter everything I thought I knew, or finally set us free. And deep down, I could feel it. This story wasn't just about who Noah's father was anymore. It was about who I was going to be. the kind of mother, the kind of woman, no matter what came next. I wasn't running anymore. The day the results came in, it was raining. Hard, punishing rain that slapped the windows and made the world outside look blurry and far away. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, the unopened email glowing like a live wire. Noah was napping in the next room, his tiny snore soft and steady through the baby monitor. For a long time I didn't move, didn't breathe, because opening that email meant the end of something. The end of wondering, the end of wishing, the end of lying to myself. My fingers hovered over the screen. And then, before I could overthink it, I tapped it open. Paternity results. Jason excluded. Brandon, 99.9% match. I stared at the words, my mind refusing to process them. Jason wasn't Noah's father. Brandon was. It hit me like a punch and a relief at the same time, like the world tilting sharply and then snapping back into place. All this time I had been chasing a ghost, begging for scraps from someone who had already walked away, trying to force a story that was never meant to be written. And now the truth was sitting in my hands. Simple, undeniable, unforgiving. I should have felt shame, guilt, maybe even regret. But instead, I felt light, like something heavy had finally slipped off my shoulders. I wiped my face. I hadn't even realized I was crying and laughed, a soft, broken sound. Not because it was funny, but because it was finally over. Later that night, I called Brandon. We talked for hours. About mistakes. About fear. About what it meant to show up, even if you were late. He didn't promise anything grand. No fairy tale ending. No instant family. Just this. I want to know him, Brandon said quietly. If you let me. I looked at Noah, watching his chest rise and fall in sleep. And I smiled, the first real smile I'd felt in what seemed like forever. We'll figure it out, I said. One step at a time. Michelle never reached out again. Jason, from what I heard, grew sicker. Maybe someday, when Noah is older and asks, I'll tell him the whole truth about the man who helped create him, and the one who almost broke me. But for now, Noah has me. And he has a chance at knowing someone who chose him, not someone who ran. Last week, I took Noah to the park. The sun was setting, throwing gold across the sky, the air full of the smell of fresh-cut grass. Noah ran ahead of me, laughing fearless, chasing bubbles a little girl was blowing nearby. I sat on a bench, hands folded in my lap, and just watched him. For the first time in years. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't chasing a man who didn't want to be caught. I wasn't begging to be chosen. I was already enough. I always had been. I just hadn't seen it yet. Noah looked back at me then, flashing that same crooked, mischievous smile that once shattered me. But this time it didn't hurt. This time it felt like hope.